Hello everyone, welcome to the Currency of Anarchy. My name is Josh Davis. Today I'm going to talk about the events leading up to the revolution back in the 1760s and 70s, and I want to talk about how that correlates to the events of what's going on today. I also want to talk about the events of today and how we've basically become a police state and how this is relating to the Communist Manifesto and how we can see what the people are actually thinking behind the curtain. I'd also want to talk about quickly the net neutrality thing and how that's not working at all, obviously, and what we can do to take action against the state in that sense. I also want to talk about how the currency is being devalued and may collapse in about 2 to 3 months. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. These events can be found at the list at ushistory.org/declaration/revwartimeline.htm. And so this is just basically a quick summary of the events that led up to the revolution and beyond. But basically I just want to go over the events that led up to it so that we can put in context what's going on today and we can see what will happen in the future, because it really does seem that history continues to repeat itself and we as humans don't learn. So let's start with the number one, in my opinion, the Sugar Act. Before the Sugar Act was the Sugar and Molasses Act, and what happened was the sugar and molasses that were coming into America, or the colonies, it was being taxed, but molasses was kind of under the radar. You know, it was basically not being taxed by the regulators, and so there was a lot of corruption, as it were. So once England's act expired, they passed a new act called the Sugar Act, and it included much more than just molasses and sugar. This was wine, coffee, cambric and printed calico, regulated the export of lumber and iron, enforced tax on molasses, caused immediate decline in the rum industry in the colonies. And so this was a big problem for the colonies. So the next act, which was soon after, in 1764, I'm sorry, the Sugar Act was April 5th of 1764. A few months later, September 1st, the Currency Act was passed. Before that, the colonies didn't have much money to begin with because all the money was created by Parliament, and the only way to do business with or to trade with any business from England was through sterling, which was silver, gold basically. And there were no mines over here in the colonies, and so it was just difficult because in order to do business they had to have money, but they didn't have money. So it was a vicious cycle, but at least they were producing something. So what they ended up wanting to do was create bills of credit. Each colony printed up their own paper, effectively. But it had no value, only because it was very confusing to see how much money was being printed and against a hard money, which is why you should have a hard money in the first place. But so that's what was going on. It was inflationary and confusing, very confusing, because each colony would print at their own pace. So there was no real way to figure out how to do trade, supply and demand, basically. So effectively, the Parliament passed the Currency Act, which stopped or ruled that each colony would not print their own money. And that's difficult, though, for the colonies, because again, it's the same problem where they don't have money. So in a sense, they were slaves to the king. And this also created a trade deficit. The Stamp Act eventually got passed, and this was another tax on any kind of business letter or even personal letter to or from families, going across the colonies or anything. You were to have a stamp on all records inside your home. Soldiers would be allowed to go into your records and make sure that the king's stamp was on each of these. And that is a breach of privacy. Why should they care? That kind of thing. It amounts to spying on what you're doing. And that's what real security should be. You are secure in your own person. You should not have to submit to being spied on by anybody. That's what's really going on there. It's not so much that it's a tax. I think that many people would not care, except that paper at that time was also printed within the colonies. So why should the king care if it's internal? So that's it. There's a couple things going on there, but mostly it is the privacy issue. The Boston Non-Importation Agreement. This is kind of a big deal, and this is where Boston was. There were insurrections within Boston, or not insurrections, but people speaking up and standing their ground, basically. And so Boston ended up being you wouldn't be able to import into Boston, and it became blocked off. And there were ships that would literally be blocking Boston from any imports. So that was a big deal, obviously, because how can you do trade? And never mind the fact that they aren't allowed to print currency. So after that, the Boston Massacre, that was literally, 2 years later, March 5th, 1770, the Boston Massacre. This is where 50 citizens started attacking just one British soldier, just standing guard. And of course, what's a soldier doing inside Boston? This is a standing army. So this is where Boston wasn't getting any imports. Boston literally had a standing army, and nobody could take it anymore, or at least according to what we understand. Of course, there are conspiracy theories or whatever saying that no, it was England that actually was shooting at the citizens. So either way, there was a rebellion anyway. It doesn't matter who shot first. It doesn't matter how it went down. We do know that it was a matter of time before things went down. You can't have a police state unless you want rebellion. It's just going to happen. I'm going to skip over the Gaspee affair. The Tea Act, of course, we know this leads to the Boston Tea Party, but the Tea Act. This was 1773, so only a little over a year later after the Boston Massacre, the Tea Act was passed, and this put harsh taxes on tea. And we all know how much the English love tea. You know, at that time, you know, all the colonists considered themselves English, and or British, or whatever you want to say. So this was a big deal. You know, don't screw with our drinking. But yeah, this was a big deal, guys. Taxes. It's all about taxes. It's all about tariffs. It's all about money. This is what the revolution was fought over. And I mean, yeah, so the Tea Act was passed. The Boston Tea Party happened later. You know, a few people dressed up as Indians and boarded ships that was importing tea, and 342 chests of tea into the water. So that's plenty, you know, and that added up to what I thought was millions of dollars. Probably not, actually. Maybe millions of dollars in our terms, but probably not. So eventually, after the Boston Tea Party, and this was literally 3 months later, the Boston Port Act, which was one of the Boston Port Act, the Administration of Justice Act, the Massachusetts Government Act, the Quartering Act, and I want to go over this, and the Quebec Act. These were all part of the Intolerable Acts, and I believe there were more, actually. But in any case, the one that I care about the most was the Quartering Act of 1774. This was passed June 2nd. And this is where soldiers were told to go up to people's houses and were allowed by the government to stay within their confines, and had to have the best bed, be treated well, and if they didn't feel like they were being treated well, then they could go to jail and otherwise. So this was a big privacy issue. This is standing army stuff. This is police state stuff. So yeah, enough of that. I think you get the point. These were the major events that led up to the revolution, and I want to make some comparisons in my brain. The Currency Act, the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act. Well, I guess basically just in this case it's the Sugar Act. This reminds me actually of the Healthcare Act passed by Obama, or Congress, and then by Obama. The Stamp Act taxed like tons of stuff. And actually, I should go beyond its more than the Healthcare Act. It's, you know, taxing cigarettes, taxing liquor, taxes. You know, New York's trying to tax things on, like Coca-Cola and that kind of thing. You know, just random stuff. All stuff that we don't necessarily need cigarettes and that kind of thing, but it's stuff that we like a lot as humans. I don't like smoking. I like beer, and I certainly like sugar once in a while, like Coke and stuff. So I see a big similarity in this aspect. You know, the Stamp Act, it was just one act. Maybe it was too much all at once. So, you know, the colonists got mad really quickly, real fast. But I see a lot of similarities with this. You know, the Healthcare Act, that's ridiculous. You know, you're forced to buy something, and you're going to be taxed on it, obviously. The Stamp Act reminds me of the TSA, and it reminds me of, you know, the police state in general, because, you know, you're allowed to search people's papers, you know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a big privacy issue. You know, TSA, they're allowed to feel your body. even back then, they weren't allowed to do that. The non-importation agreement. Let me talk to you about what is coming down the pipe right now. Capital controls are coming. This is kind of a aside, but it's not. FACTA got passed, and this has a few implications, actually. And I'm finding this article at examiner.com/article/secret tax could collapse dollar. And there's another article at dollarvigilante.com/blog/2014/3/31/ capital controls and 200 price rises in Ukraine and Ukraine -.html. I hate the new blog stuff. Anyway, so there are a few sources for this, so go find it. FACTA forces all worldwide banks to comply with the IRS if they have any transactions in US dollars. Of course, that makes sense, though. Anyway, moving on. Because the US dollar is still the world's reserve currency, all commercial banks must comply with FACTA. In order for banks to comply, either they can spend a fortune segmenting, tracking, and potentially taxing their US dollar transactions by as much as 30%, or they can simply get rid of all their US customers. That's kind of the big deal right here. You might not be banking anymore at these big corporate places like Citibank or TD or things like this. You know, if they're based outside of the United States, then they might want to get out. But it's more than that as well, because they're going to start, people are going to start dropping the dollar altogether, is what this is implying. It's not just that they're going to get rid of their customers, or the US customers. They will literally drop the dollar because FACTA implies that the dollar is losing value and they know it. You know, like they are starting to default on the US dollar. So what we're trying to do is, what I'm trying to do, is buy silver. And I don't have money for gold. There's no way I'm going to get gold. But I'll buy silver and I'll buy Bitcoin. And I'm sure you've all heard of Bitcoin. I mean, if you're a nerd like me, I should have gone into Bitcoin a long time ago. I'm a programmer. I should know this stuff. But I was nervous. And, you know, I did see a few businesses go under because of it. Especially, there was this big one in Japan. I forget the name of it. But the big deal is the dollar is losing value. I mean, of course, if you've seen my old show, I've known this for years. So I did actually buy silver at one point, but I needed to get out of silver and actually use FRNs. So I didn't have any silver, but I just bought some more today, and it'll come to me within the next 3 days or something. So yes, so I'll be safe. Question is, will you be when July 1st hits? That's my question. So basically, this has a lot of ramifications, and here's news to me actually. Two of the largest banks in the world, JP Morgan Chase and HSBC, have eliminated international wire transfers. Many small banks have reportedly followed suit. This has affected Americans' ability to buy services unavailable in the United States if they bank with Chase. Many more banks are expected to outlaw international wire transfers during the run-up to July 1st. And that is because they are dropping the dollar. It's not that they're dropping us, but effectively they are, because we live here. We're screwed. So, They see the dollar losing value. They want to get rid of the United States customers. They want to drop the dollar, though. That's what it is. So they're eliminating wire transfers, those big banks. It's not that. It's a matter of the United States trying to close some doors. Therefore, they really are closing all the doors because the banks don't want to do business with the United States. So it's not that. It's because of our lack of productivity. It's a lack of it's total complacency and totally in tune with the mass media. But if you're smart enough, you'll get out. It's the same kind of thing, only in reverse. The Currency Act tried to stop the printing of money over here, which would have been great, only for the fact that paper money is inflationary. And so the British government was half right back then, because the value of gold and silver always retains, well, to some degree it retains its value, but paper money doesn't. The funny thing is, that's exactly what's going on right now, because we're printing money. It's not even us, it's not even the United States itself, it's not backed by anything, it's the Federal Reserve, but that's another thing altogether. But it always comes back to, if currency is restricted, then the value retains itself. And that's the same thing that happens throughout history. It's not even just us. It was Rome, it was actually just recently Zimbabwe, that kind of stuff. It's always inflationary, and it's always a pain in the ass. So, yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, there's always, when you come up to a totalitarian state, they want to restrict access to everything. They want to, especially information like this show. But yeah, get out of the United States dollar. It's not a dollar. Anyway. So that's what I want to talk about in that sense. The currency is the biggest thing to me right now. I forgot to go over how the currency crisis that we're having right now, in about 2 or 3 months in my estimate, how that relates to the Revolutionary War. There was such a thing called the Boston Non-Importation Agreement, and this actually also coincides with the Currency Act, because the United States, the colonies were not allowed to print their own money, which is kind of a good thing, kind of a bad thing, but also the Non-Importation Agreement also coincides with, basically, they were trying to starve us, as the colonies, and that's exactly what we're going to have, because the money is inflationary. We're going to literally be starved, because all of our products basically come from outside the United States, and if our money is inflationary, then it will become more useless and more useless, and all we'll have here are services that we could potentially trade, but no products, effectively. So that actually might turn out to be even worse than what happened in the revolutionary times. So we're going to see a big crisis here. And never mind the fact that we are the world's reserve currency. That will change very rapidly, and they could do a few things. The globe could do a few things. Either everyone will just end up using their own currency again, or they'll turn over to one currency that exists that is much more stable, such as the euro or maybe the yen, maybe, and anything like that. Or gold and silver might turn out to be the actual currency of the world again, because originally the United States was backed by gold, so it was the reserve currency effectively. And also, there's this idea of a basket of currencies, and this makes up what's called the SDR, special drawing rights. That's very abstract to me. I don't understand that. But there are different things that the globe could end up using. The problem is us. Since we're not going to have that standard, whatever it is, we're going to have a hard time, and that's precisely why we see the totalitarian state rising right now. Because they know the game is over, and they know that what they wanted to do, was gain control of the United States. From my perspective, I'm talking about banks, the big banks. They were the ones that created the Federal Reserve way back when anyway, so they're winning. What we need to do is rise up, or we need to, I continue to spread the message of what is actually happening. I don't suggest rising up because I'm nonviolent. Anarcho-capitalism is about peace and understanding, and so it's more like we have to understand what the problem is and probably starve the beast, as it were, stop paying taxes, just as the revolution was started. It might exactly end up that way, unfortunately, but what I'm saying is we need to know what's going on. So that's where I'm coming from there. So I want to go over what we see today is much like what Karl Marx was suggesting in the Communist Manifesto. He was suggesting a way to transition into communist society, as in like a peaceful communism, which is a contradiction. It's impossible. There has to be someone managing it. Therefore, it's not going to work, because people will become corrupt, and people will need to be paid within the government itself. So anarcho-communism is a joke. But where I'm coming from, I do want to mention how we've come to almost communism. This is what Mussolini would have called fascism. The first, there are a list of 10 things, basically, what communism is. And so I wanted to go over this list, and the first one is abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. This is where understanding our system of land ownership is so important. In the days of feudalism, the king would own the land, all of the land, and he split it up into fiefs. And so this is feudalism. He split it into fiefs, and each fief was owned by a noble. But this means that if the king owns the land, then he can't own the land, right? There's only one owner of anything. So the idea is a fief was an estate. And so he owned, or the noble owned, all of the stuff on the land, but not the land. So he would own the house, he would own a shed, he would own tools, he would own even slaves at that time, or you know what I'm talking about. He would own these things, and he would be able to decide how these tools or whatever would be allocated, or whatever. He would be the guy on that estate. And effectively, this is what we have today. And it's actually known that we have a fee simple system. It's not, purely evil or whatever, and there are no slaves anymore, but we are slaves because we don't own the land. This is why we pay property taxes. Yes, you own the house if you own a piece of property, theoretically. You own the house, you own everything on it, you do not own the land. This is why you're paying property taxes. We always had this problem in the United States, except originally when the colonies broke off from England, everyone was granted the land that they owned. So they literally owned the land. They had a allodial title, real title to the land. But over time, as property was traded or left alone or whatever, the state, whichever state you were in, would reclaim the land and then give it out as in a fee simple way. So when you signed title to the land, it went back to the state and it came back as a certificate. It wasn't the actual title. It was basically telling you own what's on it. It's the fief, or the fee, or whichever term you wish to call it. So you were tenant. You were the tenant. Therefore, you pay rent to your state. So there's a difference between estate and allodial title, or fee and allodial title, whatever. Or granted. All these terms are almost interchangeable, but this is how abolition of property works. It's through subversion. You don't know it, but you don't own it. So yeah, that's already happened. Abolition of property and land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Now that's where it goes wrong, of course, because all rents of land do not go to public purposes. They just go to the employees of the state, for the most part. Of course, you could have roads or parks or something like that, but really, it just goes to the employees, whoever's doing the paper shuffling. Number 2 in the Communist Manifesto is a heavy graduated income tax. We've got that, of course. At one point, way back when, 99% of rich people's income, over a certain amount, went to the state. That's in the bag. We all would not disagree with that. Abolition of all right to inheritance. That's close. I believe there's like a 50% tax on most inheritances, depending. Or at least there was at one point. So that's not completely implemented, and I don't think anyone would actually give in to that at all. Confiscation of property of all immigrants and rebels. So if you were to try to leave, all of your property would go. And I believe that was implemented in a couple of communist countries, like Cuba or something like that. I gotta look into that. But yeah, I could definitely see that. Like if you were a rebel and you had the thoughts that I have or whatever, yeah, you'd be severely punished and probably put in jail, obviously. And the fifth one is centralization of credit in hands of the state with a national bank with state capital. Of course, the Federal Reserve note. Of course, that's a joke too, because that's basically just bankers' interest. It's barely part of the state at all. But yeah, it's all credit, and quite literally credit. It's not a real asset. It's real debt from the. It's debt that the government has to the banks. That's what a Federal Reserve note is. So this isn't completely true. Number 5, centralization of credit, but we basically could say that that's knocked off the list. Yeah, good for you guys. Centralization of the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the state. The roads are public roads. The transportation, the trains basically are all either corporate or public. Planes are corporate and have security given by the government. So yeah, that's basically in the bag. And a lot of people definitely disagree with the state doing this at all. But people go along with it. So we're now on to number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and improvement of soil. I do see that the farms are in the hands of the state, basically. They're subsidized, and we've got Monsanto. That's a big one to everybody. We see that GM, the car company, went into the hands of the state. So yeah, that's basically just saying that corporatism. Number 7 is basically just corporatism, and we see that everywhere. A lot of people are against corporations, and I am as well, because it basically becomes a monopolistic thing, just like the government. Equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. We already saw this, not necessarily armies per se, but the police become the army. We've seen this already. A year ago, Boston Marathon, case in point. Equal liability of all to labor. Yes, of course, if you're able to, then you must, and this is becoming the truth. Otherwise, you're going to be dependent on the government. And that's where real socialism definitely comes in, and people are clamoring for it. I just don't understand. Don't you want your freedom instead? You want to be a slave to the state. Unbelievable. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. This is going to be a very difficult thing for a state to do, especially in our country, because we have deserts. But that's exactly what they're talking about too. What was it? The 2 pieces ago, cultivation of wastelands. So I don't see how that really can happen. It would be interesting to actually, on a intellectual level, to see them try to do that, because it didn't work in Russia. When they tried to cultivate land up in Russia for corn, and it just didn't work. And it caused famine and all this other stuff. It just doesn't work. You can't do it. But hey, if you're going to try to do it, go for it. But the gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country, we see this in Massachusetts already. we don't have counties for the counties that we say anymore, at least for the most part. Essex County is abolished, and a few others. I just know the one that I'm in, but thankfully there still are county sheriffs for the most part. But yeah, that's going to happen. Eventually the state is going to eat up all of the, supposed counties that it has, and then who knows what's going to happen after that. The only way I can actually see any more boundaries disappear is when they get rid of the state of Massachusetts altogether, and there's going to be big fighting if they start doing that. And that's on even a statist level. This isn't just an anarchist point of view, I believe that if anyone were to try to abolish a state and make it part of the Federation, that's going to be a big deal. Factory labor in combination of education with industrial labor. Yeah, but I get that. Abolition of children's factory labor. We don't even have that anymore, honestly, because everything's computerized for the most part. But at the same time, we aren't making our own products. So once the dollar collapses, I believe that maybe kids will actually go back into the workforce. And obviously we see free education everywhere, but they're teaching the wrong stuff. I mean, they're teaching very immoral stuff, and it's breaking down society altogether. And the kids don't know any better. They think that they want to learn, which makes sense. But when you're devaluing kids, they become more violent, and they believe that the state is good, and that's where we're going to see the police state rise even further. It has to do with the education. That's number one. So abolition of children's factory labor and combination of education with industrial labor. I could see that happening too, like especially if the corporations are the ones that are putting kids to labor. So that's the irony, though. So we'll see what happens. And I believe that a lot of this has transpired. So interesting stuff right there. One of the things I wanted to talk about was how the police state is growing. We see cameras in schools and on public roads, and we don't see, or we also see these cameras scanning license plates in order to find information, and also to charge people at parking garages, which can be interesting, but also a little scary. But that's also the easy pass idea that had to be implemented to find out where you're going as well. So it's really quite scary. So we're seeing a lot of security measures for the state, but we aren't seeing any real security measures for us, in that we have very old technology. Roads, the asphalt has been there for years and years and years and years, and they're becoming worse and worse. So in that, you realize they really are socialized roads. If they were privatized, they would be much more safe, fewer bumps, so it would affect your car much less. And if the road were at fault and broke your shocks, for example, you would be able to sue the road company, and they'd have to pay up. But of course, governments aren't ever at fault. So that's the biggest thing about the roads, and I really am sick of them, honestly. The more I, keep my eyes open. So you've got so many things wrong with these roads, and all they're trying to do is, trying to find you and hunt you down. That's what this is all about. They've got your license and registration. You've got an inspection sticker. They got you suckered down and everything. They've got cameras on the roads now. Something that was also very scary is a federal appeals court ruled that driving with your hands at 10 and 2 is suspicious, and it's enough for someone to pull you over. Isn't that scary? If you're driving the correct way, which nobody ever does, but if you do what you're taught, then they can pull you over. That's messed up. I do want to talk about how I did a special on my old show about roads itself. I mean, I basically took a camera and talked about how bad roads really actually are and how they could be improved when you privatize them. And Walter Block is just he's an Austrian economist, and he specializes in this kind of thing, just roads. He thinks about how it could actually work, how businesses could either make money or lose money doing business in roads. I suggest you check that out. It's not enough to just make fun of people that want to be secure with their roads. No, if you privatize roads, you'd actually have a much more efficient system, and people would want you to use them, so they would improve the roads, they would try to make them as safe as possible, and maybe even think up new ways to secure the roads themselves. I always thought that one interesting way of potentially making people more safe on the road is, if you take a look at Jurassic Park, they have those Jeeps, or they have those sports vehicles, and they're metal bars that kind of guide you along so that you don't get lost, and I think that's an interesting idea. It probably is not the best idea in that, what if you have to turn around or you've got to take a turn, but at least it's an innovation that could be useful, and we never see any kind of barriers really, except for Jersey barriers, and they're right next to you. So there's got to be a more efficient system than what we have right now, is all I'm saying. Anyway, the whole point of what we've got right now is the fact that you've got cameras everywhere, you've got IDs and tags, and basically you're acting like you're guilty before you're proven innocent in any case. And we see so many pictures and videos of where cops are doing the wrong thing. They're just being outright bloody and over the top. Never mind the use of force being wrong in the first place, but they're going over the top, and they're literally killing people now for saying the wrong thing or even looking at them the wrong way. And they're not being held accountable. So what I'm saying is, if we're not there already, welcome to totalitarianism. It's right around the corner if we're not there already. And if you're watching this video, you're probably waking up, which is great. So keep on looking, keep on doing the research, keep on thinking outside the box, because when you trap yourself right back in, you're not doing yourself a service. So keep on searching, keep on looking for the truth, and hopefully this helped. Especially the best way to keep yourself free is by checking this place out that was just sent to me today. ResetTheNet is a new organization, and you can find that at ResetTheNet.org. So take a look at this.
We use the internet to be ourselves, but governments are building a prison around it. We have to stop them, but how? They seem so vast and powerful. But government spies have a weakness. They can hack anybody, but they can't hack everybody. Folks like the NSA depend on collecting insecure data from tapped fiber. They depend on our mistakes. Mistakes we can fix. The plan? Reset the net. Together, on June 5th, 1 year after Snowden's first NSA story, we all take one powerful step to turn off government spying and turn on freedom. The call is simple. Find some territory of the internet that you can protect from prying eyes. Seize it and hold it. Are you a developer? Promise to add one NSA-resistant feature to your app. Are you an internet user? Promise to try one NSA-resistant privacy tool, and then show a friend. Got a website or Tumblr? Run our splash screen on March 27th to show the world we're resetting the net. This is our moment to rally and realize our power. Without needing anyone's permission, we can decide our future, one that's safe, open, and free. It won't be easy, but if we work hard now, the internet will never be a prison. Reset the net. Are you in? Sign up.
So that is ResetTheNet.org. The idea is to try to make the internet protected once again from government spying. And the point is, actually, check this out, they have 19,000 signatures now. If you check this out, you can sign on to do this. Hopefully, if you're a programmer, you could create something that could be protected from government eyes. And if you're a consumer, hopefully you can grab something that is private and use that instead of some other potentially public tool. So that's a great idea, and so that's supposed to go into effect June 5th, and today is May 7th, so that's 1 month from now, and that's great stuff. Here's a reference to my other show, or my show last time. What if I told you you are not a person, but you have a person? This is true, because actually, this is how corporatism really works. Someone who works for the hospital you were born at, they sign a document and send it off to the government. The government sends you back a birth certificate. The original document is called the Certificate of Live Birth, and that is you, and that's great. You know, they have, actually, this is very important for a government to work, really. You know, so they have you on record, sure, whatever, it's great. But then they send you a birth certificate, and this is your corporate person. This is not you, but this is what you think you are, or it says it has your name on it, but it's not you. So you have two people. One's a corporation, one is you. You are you, obviously, but very confusing stuff, but it's very true. Here's another picture I found. If stealing 100% of the product of someone's labor is slavery, at what percentage is it not slavery? I should think that if I am a free person, then I should keep all of my labor, all of my property, all the money that I accrue. But you know, so there's a good question. You know, that's the big debate. So I'll wrap it up there. Information is the currency of anarchy. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you have a good night and be safe. Don't forget to look into silver.